Welcome back to We Love the State. It's great to be here. This is the government's favorite podcast, just in case you weren't aware. I'm your host, Andy Coons. Over here to my left is my co-host, Ben DeJong. How you doing, Ben?
Doing good. It feels good back in the captain's chair. We took a little hiatus last week. We were both swamped with a lot of things going on. Andy was a little under the weather, so we apologize for the skipped episode, even though I think the time before we're going to be consistent.
Yeah.
Well, tough beans, life happens. But we're back, and we're glad to be back, and we are going to do our best to be a lot more consistent on trying to get these episodes out routinely. We've already actually spent, the last hour talking about other stuff that we have coming down the pike. I know we've probably said this multiple times about how excited we are about everything that's happening, and we haven't said shit on the podcast.
Yeah.
But trust us, it's coming.
Yeah.
We're just building hype.
Yeah. It's really exciting, and I wish I could talk about everything. Well, okay, one thing I can talk about is, hey, my album dropped finally after I've been talking about it for like a year. It's called God Emperor. It is everywhere you stream music, even YouTube Music, which I don't know anybody that actually uses that service, but it's there.
It's there.
Yeah.
That's an accomplishment. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's amazing how many people I've heard saying, one day I'm going to, create an album, or my band, and it just never happens.
Yeah.
So the fact that you had a dream, you stuck with it, and now it's released, I think you're among the very, very few people who've actually followed through with a dream.
Yeah.
So that's a big fucking deal.
Yeah. This has been a lifelong dream for me. I've been writing music since I was 9. I think the first song I ever wrote, I was 9 years old. And I've just been writing music ever since. And I struggle really bad with that Marty McFly syndrome where it's I can't take the rejection, And so far I've only got one negative comment about it. That's it,
Well, and I would say, even if heavy metal this isn't your taste in music, it's still good music. There's even I can't stand country for the most part, but there are some country songs where I fucking hate it, but that's some talent right there. Yeah. Whether it's the guitar or whether it is, and again, ladies and gentlemen, this guy did all of the music himself. Okay, every instrument. I'm just when he first told me that, and after, I think I listened to a track first, and then you told me that, I was bullshit. This is a lying libertarian right here. And no, it's it's all Andy. So just, incredible.
Yeah. So
all those music lessons paid off.
Oh man, I didn't take any music lessons.
See? Crazy.
I just started fucking around with the guitar when I was 16. And then all these years later, I just learned how to record music and everything. But anyway, you can find that Apple and Spotify. You can go and do a YouTube search of the video or of the songs, and they'll pop up. But anyway, you can find it under the name Monopoly on Violence. That's the band name that I chose. And a while ago, it was last summer, I put out a Twitter poll, and I was like, for my album, that's how long I've been talking about it. For my album, should I release it under the name Andy Coons, or should I come up with a band name? And out of I think only 50 people voted or something like that. But it was overwhelmingly, you should come up with a band name. And so I came up with Monopoly on Violence.
Which is just brilliant.
Well, thank you.
The fact that nobody else has used it, you guys suck. Because that just,
it's been used by a few different bands for song titles.
I was going to say track names.
Yeah, but never the band name. And so, anyway, I thought that was perfect, and this is super, super libertarian metal. There's even songs. There's a song on the album called "Nobody Writes Songs About Economics," and it's a song about economics. So look it up. God Emperor by Monopoly on Violence. That is me. It's been a long time coming. I started writing that album over 3 years ago, and
considering you did all the work yourself, you wrote the lyrics, you wrote the music, you played the instruments, you did the editing, you did the cutting. The fact that you did it in 3 years with, you know, and maintaining a family and a career, multiple careers at this point.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you make me feel really lazy.
Well, I had a lot of fun doing it. I cannot wait to get started on the next one because I don't have a band, you know, and so I don't have to tour this album for a year and a half or 2 years, you know. I can just get started on the next one. So I am going to get started on the next one pretty soon. And I got to figure out exactly what the schedule is going to look like. But from start to finish, I want to live stream the recording of this next album. And so it's probably going to be some scheduled thing on TikTok, or I might do like go live on YouTube or something like that. But yeah, I want to live stream, you know, probably not every day, but probably 2 or 3 times a week, where I'm out here working for a couple of hours, writing and recording, and
just to kind of a glimpse behind the scenes of the process.
Yeah, but like this next one, is not going to take me 3 years. You know.
Well, I mean, I'm sure you learned a shit ton.
Oh yeah. I mean,
so,
I've got a lot more ideas going to this next album than I did going into God Emperor. You know, that was something it was a grueling process, sort of coming up with the initial ideas. But since I finished God Emperor, it's just my mind's been flooding with new riff ideas and new sort of like structural ideas for songs, and that like I've got a good soil in my brain for sprouting new ideas.
Well, I'm sure the confidence is there too, right? Because I know if I were to, I mean, you kind of were uncharted waters for the first album, and so now that you proved to yourself that you can do it, I think it probably takes that like the edge off of second guessing or questioning, like, no.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And especially because the thing that I really struggled with was like the recording quality. I did all this on GarageBand, you know, and so it's like I don't have Pro Tools, I don't have Logic, I don't have $1,000 plugins or anything like that. You know, I did it all on GarageBand with my guitar and my bass and my voice.
In a garage,
yeah. And so it's like, you know, it's not the best recording quality out there because I do have limitations with GarageBand, but it's like, and this is where I feel really weird because I'm going to pat myself on the back, but it's like what I was able to do for metal with zero education on music production, just me fucking around a GarageBand by myself with my guitar over years and years and years. I think I was able to pull off a really good sound quality.
Well, and I mean, I've listened to a lot of the tracks, and I would never in a million years have guessed this was done by one guy in a garage.
Right.
So yeah, maybe if you have, you know, $50,000 like surround sound system that you could pick up on, you know, some whatever.
Yeah.
But most people are going to throw their earbuds on and listen to this, and you're never going to know that it was done in a garage with GarageBand.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. Well, that's enough ass kissing for me. So we would, 8.5 minutes, almost 9 minutes into this. Go check out God Emperor anywhere you find music. It's under the name Monopoly on Violence. There's a pig on the cover. Enjoy. Let me know what you think. Tweet at me, whatever. It's good to be back. Welcome back, everybody. This is We Love State, again, the government's favorite podcast. So there was a drone strike.
Yeah, there was a drone strike. It's been, I don't know if it's actually been, how much it's been covered on like corporate news. And I think we talked about this last time. I really want to bring the kind of that terminology of like it's propaganda news. But I've listened to quite a bit on Judge Andrew Napolitano's podcast, Clint Russell. So there's a lot of different viewpoints. The nice thing about Judging Freedom with Andrew Napolitano, a little plug for the judge.
The Nap.
Mr. Nap. He's brought on quite a few people with government background, so CIA, FBI, military. So he's gotten quite a few different viewpoints. I know for me, when I first watched the video and heard about it, I'm like, this has got to be a false flag.
Right.
Like, it's just, the war's been dragging on. I think there's a lot of like voices in Russia that's like, finish this. Like, you're pussyfooting around.
Yeah.
And again, I think Putin's done a lot with restraining, like comparing this to like what the U.S. did in Iraq and Afghanistan. Like, we killed everybody.
Yeah. Like,
there was just like leveling cities, and we moved as fast as possible, and we didn't care who died. And Putin has been very restrained in comparison to us. Like, he is only going after military targets. He is very carefully, progressing through the Ukraine. So, yeah, it's been a lot of like kind of back and forth. I mean, we have to kind of take Russia's word for it. Like, I don't know if they've, recovered any fragments from the drone. I think that would be telling if they were to say, hey, look, this is a U.S. I don't even know if we make drones, considering we don't make shit anymore. But, if it's an Iraqi drone is going to be different than if the drone came from, I don't know who else makes drones that we use. But it's one of those, it's kind of like the missiles in Poland. Like, it's something that could have started World War III. Like, it could have been used as an excuse to start World War III.
Yeah.
And one of these incidents? I think it's incidents. Incidai. Plural. One of these is going to trigger it.
Yeah.
And the longer we prolong the war and continue to fund, because that's what we're doing, we're prolonging the war on purpose. I'm talking about we being the U.S. government, not us here at We Love the State.
It's a little bit us, I'm not going to lie.
Oh, it's a little. I mean, the state is involved.
I wrote a letter.
Under a bare bulb in the typewriter in my basement. It's a scary time that we're living in. Like, it's just going to be, it only takes one trigger finger on a missile and things snowball.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's really scary. And I mean, what's that's scary, and what's even further terrifying is the support that people are getting, or that people are giving for stuff like this. Not looking a single step ahead. Just, this makes me feel good because I'm Team Ukraine, and I'm, all the people on the TV tell me that if you disagree with all this stuff, you're pro Putin, you're pro Russia. And it's like, I'm pro Ukraine. I'm also pro Russia. Like, the people there.
But I'm not pro war. I'm not pro death.
Yeah. And so it's like, I remember there's a guy I used to get my hair cut from. He was very, very left leaning. And the last time I got a haircut from him, we were talking about the war in Ukraine. And I told him my stance. I was like, I'm anti-war. I think we should stay out of it. He goes, but I mean, what about all those Ukrainians? I was like, they're not Americans.
And they wouldn't be dead if we stayed out of it.
Yeah. I was like,
pro-Ukrainian,
we are going to kill way more Russians and Ukrainians with our involvement than if we just let these two countries settle their own beef themselves, and we wouldn't be putting a target on several other countries in the world. Okay. So then the other part of that is like, and I told him, I was like, how many U.S. soldiers are you okay with dying so that Ukraine can keep their sovereignty? How many? And, it didn't get heated or anything like that. I didn't put a lot of pressure on him because I didn't want him to fuck up my haircut.
But, so you walk out with a mohawk.
Right. Or like the friar tuck.
Fuck you, peace boy.
But it's like, I mean, that's a question anybody needs to be asking. One of these like pro-U.S. involvement with this proxy war people, the leftists out there, the lefties, like, you need to ask them, like, how many people do you know who has a kid in the military, or a brother in the military, or a cousin in the military? How many of those people are you okay with sacrificing for Ukrainian sovereignty? How many? Give me a number. All right. Is it 5? Is it 10? Is it 1,000? Is it 10,000? Is it 2 million? Like how many of those friends and family members or adjacent friends or family members do you know would you be okay with like getting shot in the face by a Russian so that Ukraine can be sovereign? You know? And that's why, like, there
not
is
even to mention nuclear holocaust.
not even remotely approaching the fact that we are fucking with a nuclear power, you know, that really could kill a lot of people in the United States. You know, we have a pretty impressive missile defense system, but at the same time, we're talking about somebody who has hundreds of nukes. We're not going to be able to stop every single one of them. So, and the ones that could get through, they would absolutely destroy this country.
Yeah, not to mention the fallout. I mean, we haven't seen, I mean, I guess outside of like tests, but you know, I mean, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, I mean, those were like, in the grand scheme of things, I mean, we've got non-nuclear bombs that are that big.
Yeah.
Like the nuclear weapons we have today make those look like a sneeze in the wind. I mean, it's just yeah. I don't know. It's hard to figure out like why has America dissolved into its, and I mean, part of it I'm sure is we're soft. We've been kind of spoiled rotten. Mm-hmm. We don't, you know, we have all of these rights that we're constantly throwing around, like right to education and right to this and right. It's just so me-centered.
Yeah.
That the thought of like the thought of my neighbor dying in this war, like people don't think about that, or my cousin, or my son-in-law, or my daughter-in-law, like. Mm-hmm. How many family members, to make it even more personal, are you willing to sacrifice for Ukraine?
Yeah.
Like, would you send your children, you know, like for me, those disgusting humans in Congress who vote for every $1 million or $1 billion that go to Ukraine, they should be sending their kids along with that money.
Yeah.
Like, that should be the penalty of risking nuclear war. You should have to, you first.
Your kids are on the front fucking lines.
You first.
Mine can be at the back.
Yep. It just drives me nuts that people are so ignorant. Mm-hmm. And it's almost, I don't know if it's like self-imposed ignorance or just, that'll never happen. We got to defend, like what dream world are you living in to think that this couldn't devolve into a nuclear holocaust or World War III?
Yeah.
And World War III is probably the best case scenario outside, if you're looking at between that and nuclear holocaust.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be the best case scenario. And like, this is something that I heard from Scott Horton. I know sometimes Scott tends to, I'm not on a first name basis with him.
Me and Scott.
Mr. Horton.
I call him Scotty.
SH, my dude. No, but I know that sometimes Scott Horton, Jesus Christ, can be a little
not Jesus Christ, Scott Horton.
I know he can be a little over dramatic sometimes, but he was. There was something I was listening to him talking about nukes, and he was saying that every nuke that goes off, there is a not zero chance that the nuclear fireball can set the atmosphere on fire. Like it can start a chain reaction that would ignite the atmosphere and essentially sterilize the entire planet, and it's like that's something like, hey, the fact that it's a possibility, all right, it's remote, but the fact that it's not fucking zero, like how high do those chances get when there are two nuclear armed countries,
the two biggest,
flinging nuclear bombs at each other? That chance goes up exponentially, and it's like I'm sorry. If Ukraine gets taken by Russia, Ukraine gets taken by Russia.
Well, and Russia's
it's ultimately better than nuclear holocaust.
Russia wanted guarantees that they weren't joining NATO, and they wanted them to stop bombing the Russians in Bakhmut and the eastern provinces of Ukraine. That's all they want. Stop killing Russians in Ukraine, and we want you to maintain neutrality. And what did we do? We sent over Kamala Harris and said, "Yep, they're going to be joining Ukraine." Well, what is Putin supposed to do? He said that's a red line, and you basically said, "I dare you," because now we're going to do exactly what you don't want us to do. To me, everything that's happening is exactly what the U.S. government wanted to happen.
Yeah,
because they're literally forcing, Putin's hand. You can go all the way back to 2014 when we overthrew, their elected president, or we funded that that coup.
Okay, conspiracy theory time. I'm not saying I believe in this, but I'm just saying it's interesting to think about. There have been so many stories about mega rich, multi billionaires buying up land in really remote parts of the world and building these huge houses, almost like a compound,
like bunkers,
like massive survival shelters.
Yeah, I have seen some of that.
And they're way up in the mountains, and of course there's a mansion on top of it, but they're fully protected, fully stocked with food, with years worth of food. Okay. We also know that the US government has nuclear bunkers, and they have nuclear contingency plans. So there's probably years and years and years worth of food stored in those too, that have extremely long shelf lives and stuff like that. So then pair that with the Great Reset. What if the Great Reset is not at all what we're being told it is, where
it's just a financial reset?
Not even that. What if the Great Reset is, what if the United States is pushing Russia towards nuclear war because a lot of these mega rich people, with the exception of Elon Musk, is pro population reduction? They're saying that we're overpopulated. And so what if they want nuclear war to wipe out a substantial amount of the human race, so that way they can have their Great Reset and rebuild the world in their image in a way that would ensure that their line stays wealthy forever?
I think if nuclear war could be precise enough to decide, the problem with nuclear war is you risk eliminating all life on Earth and making Earth uninhabitable.
Right.
That's a distinct possibility, to whether you're going to fry the atmosphere, whether you're going to kill off all living things outside of maybe a handful that are buried deep underground, but then it's a wasteland. I kind of lean towards the military industrial complex lost a shit ton of money when we pulled out of Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So now they're back rolling in dough. You've got an economic crisis which has been on the horizon for the last couple of years, that if we're at war, we can blame Putin. So it's a way for the U.S. government to deflect blame. It's sensationalized. If you have a bad guy, then nothing that goes wrong is ever your fault, because you can always blame the bad guy.
Right.
So I think it's a win for the U.S. government on multiple fronts. You're paying off all of your, contractors. You don't have to lose anybody directly. So you're just killing Ukrainians, and who gives a shit about them anyhow?
Yeah.
There is a huge demand for natural resources, and Russia's flush. So I think there is a big push from the big corporations that they want access to Russia. And so if we can somehow wear Putin down, or get people to turn against him, or somehow assassinate him, back to the bombing, it opens the door for these companies to rape and pillage Russia, like we've done, country after country.
Yeah.
And so I think the explanation for it is probably a combination of a lot of those little things, but there is definitely a conspiracy afoot when we're talking about like global governance, global currency, central bank digital currency. I mean, it's kind of weird because at this point you're almost rooting for the bad guys.
Yeah.
Because without communist China, without Putin, without North Korea, without these countries to push back against the West, we could have a one world government and be all under the thumb of the corporations.
Yeah. Whew. That's scary as shit.
It's a weird like dilemma to be like, go communism, like, but it's the only. I mean, they're really the bulwark that's left to stop this our fascist governance of corporate power and government authority. And that's what most Western countries have, a variation of that level of fascism. That, I mean, it eats and it grows. It's just it's a symbiont. Like it just devours the populations. And it's, it can't go on forever. I mean, I can't remember. I read an article about like global debt, and it's just like, it's a numbers that you can't even, you're like, like it does, like numbers until you see it on paper and you're like, I need a poster to fill all
like,
of these
how many
zeros.
Fucking zeros is that?
And you're like, it's not sustainable. Like I think across the board. So whether we like it or not, there's going to be a financial reset, and it's going to come with more government control.
Yeah.
And I just, it is scary to think about all the different ways that things could play out.
Yeah.
I've always been a champion of national divorce because I think that gives a lot of people the ability to, have self-governance in smaller areas like states and counties. It would force competition between states, like California. Like, they're talking about paying $3 million for every black person that lives in California for reparations from a state that never actually had slavery.
Yeah.
But like, if California had to cough up that money on their own, they'd go bankrupt.
Yeah.
But if they have the Federal Reserve to bail them out, then they could put forward something stupid like that.
Yeah.
So in a national divorce scenario, they couldn't. So it almost prevents the excess of authoritarianism and wokeism.
I'm actually pro reparations, believe it or not, but they can't use tax dollars. So they have to figure out how to come up with that money outside of taxing.
Inflation, then, which is tax.
No.
Because you have to print the money.
They can't print it. These are the rules that have to be followed in order for me to support reparations.
Gotcha.
They can't print it. They can't tax it. So
then you don't support. How else could they come up with the money?
I don't know. Set up lemonade stands. But if they start selling a product and they use the profits from that to fuel reparations, I'd be 100% okay with it.
Yeah, if it's voluntary and privatized. I mean, if you wanted a GoFundMe to pay for reparations,
but
make it 100% voluntary.
So, because looking at the not to just wildly change topics to race, but
nuclear holocaust to reparations.
But like, if you look at the history of the black population in the United States, they started off as slaves, all right, and then when slavery ended, they were guaranteed 40 acres and a mule, and Andrew Jackson struck that down. Said absolutely not going to happen. So they literally started off in this country with nothing, barely even the clothes on their back. And from the end of slavery up until about the 1960s, the black populations in this country were thriving. They were getting married. They were having children. Their rate of divorce was lower than whites. That more of them were getting married than white people were. And very strong communities that had their own economies, like North Tulsa before the North
race
Tulsa
riots.
Well, before the massacre, they like it was considered the Black Wall Street of America, you know, and they had their own banks. They were giving out loans, you know, like they had their own
separate
individual economy, you know, and it was a black economy, and there were black owned businesses, and there were black millionaires, and that's what black culture was back then, you know. It's not like it is today. Today, black culture is toxic, you know, and if you talk to black people out there who like do have families and like take care of their families and have a career and stuff like that, like they don't like black culture. If you talk to Africans, they do not like American black culture. They don't identify with American black culture, you know. But that didn't start until, and actually there's a Thomas Sowell video about this, and he's talking about like what is black culture, and basically it boils down to the sort of stereotypical black like gangbanger type dude that all came from poor Southerners after the Civil War, because a lot of poor whites who lived in the South used that sort of same rhetoric. They were prone to violence. They were oversexed. Like there were a lot of there's a lot of like cultural decay in the South during the Civil War
across the races.
Yeah, or it primarily with whites, you know, and so then that sort of hood culture. I guess I don't know all the proper terminology to make it not piss somebody off. If you're pissed, I'm very sorry. I'm trying my best here, but the sort of hood culture that we see now, like that started with poor whites in the South, you know, and so that was kind of adopted by some circles in the black community. All right,
cultural appropriation, some may say.
Well, you could say that, and
it's not positive.
But anyway, and there were a lot of northern like journalists who would talk about life in the South, and they would talk about these. They used to be called shit. They used to be called, or that's what like hillbilly and not cracker, hillbilly and redneck came from. That was the North's way of talking about poor white Southerners who had this hood culture. You know, they called them rednecks and hillbillies. All right. So then if you fast forward, the majority of black America is thriving until you get to the 60s, because that's when there's this huge push to get black people onto welfare, you know, and that right there was the start of the destruction of the black race in America.
Why do you think that their kind of thought is, if we can get them all on welfare, that would be the reparations to make me feel good about the years of oppression?
I think that's how they tried to sell it, so that way the politicians who were talking about this stuff could get elected. I think those politicians were playing off of white guilt, but like, I think that ultimately what the ultimate goal is we are going to make sure that, because it was the Democratic Party pushing this, we are going to make sure that these people will always vote for us.
Right. Which is typical welfare programs. It's buying votes.
Yes. And so how do you get these people to always vote for us? You have to make them dependent on us.
Right.
You know? And I'm not sitting here saying like, oh, the Republicans would have never done that. The Democrats just thought of it first.
Yeah.
You know, the Republicans had the Lily White movement back in the turn of the century, where you had a ton of black politicians, a ton of black people in the Republican Party, and to appease white Southerners, they started expelling black members from the Republican Party. That's what they did back in the turn of the century. And they wanted more white voters, so they got rid of the black party members. And then, see, this is a safe party for the whites, you know? So, and that's another thing that just infuriates me about the Republican Party is they're like, well, the Democrats are the ones that had the KKK. And it's like, yeah, but
we're the party of Lincoln.
Yeah, right.
The first fascist.
Right.
I said that at work today, and everyone was like, oh, here we go.
But anyway, it's like, yeah, the Republicans are no better. Their little gotcha, oh, you guys started the KKK, is not the win that they think it is, because you guys had the Lily White movement. You're just as bad as the Democrats were. All right. The Democrats just thought of a good idea to good for the party. Good for the party to create a permanent voting bloc with Black Americans. And that's every time they pick a minority to like helicopter mom over. That's what they're doing. They're trying to guarantee a voting bloc.
So what do you think, kind of like tying into that, like one of the things that a lot of people were like hated Tucker Carlson for was the Great Replacement theory, where if we have open borders, it's going to push whites out and become the minority. I think that's to some degree unfairly categorized the way that I think Tucker was more looking at it from the Democrats are being very strategic about all of these immigrants and where they're putting them. They're putting them in red states because the hope is that they will always vote Democrats because Democrats got them into the country. And so you can flip red states to blue states. And I've heard Tucker talk about that, and there are videos of Democrats basically admitting to this. Mm-hmm. But how do you think that would play out?
I mean, it's definitely possible, but I'm like, the way I see it is like, well,
I'm just thinking like the carrot on the stick is also welfare programs.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of governors and senators and stuff like that you'd have to get onto your side if you actually wanted to make something like that work,
It seems like it's happening. I mean, there's a lot of governors that complaining that it's happening.
Yeah. I mean, do you think whites are being pushed out, or do you think whites are being like drowned out?
Right. I don't think they're being pushed out. I just think that, and I don't necessarily think it's really about race. It's mm-hmm. about control.
Yeah.
It's using government programs and handouts to buy votes.
Yeah.
And if you can, no matter where those votes are coming from, I mean, whether they're refugees from, the Middle East or Mexico, it doesn't matter as long as you're voting Democrat.
Yeah. Yep.
So it's kind of using the blueprint that they did to the African American community, mm-hmm. and now like, oh, it worked great. Like, I mean, what did Biden say? If you're not black if you don't vote Democrat or something like.
Well, they want to get these immigrants in here so that they'll have kids. The kids is what's going to lock them into the country, and the kids are going to be the ones growing up and voting Democrat. Because the Republicans are going to be the ones that send my parents back to Guatemala, or the Republicans want to send my parents back to Panama.
Right.
Or
they
whatever.
Didn't want us here in the first place.
Yeah.
And it doesn't help when that's one of the things.
But they have to do that. They have to do that because liberals are not having kids. They're killing their kids.
Yeah, that's true.
Republicans are the ones out there like starting families, and so it literally is a breeding competition to see who can have the most kids, because
it is kind of a replacement because mm-hmm. Democrats are having all the abortions, mm-hmm. so they're dying out. They're killing their own party.
Yeah.
So you have to replace those aborted fetuses
mm-hmm.
with immigrants.
Yeah.
Otherwise you're going to run out of voters.
That's how they're replacing their ranks.
It is kind of sinister in a way, mm-hmm. and sick.
Because
it makes sense.
These people and I'm not wholly against like open borders in the sort of anarchist sense, where it's like the you can have private borders because that would be private property and stuff like that, but like but even if we had a private border, like I would still kind of view that as an open border, because you can pay to come in, or like you can you can have some sort of contractual thing where you're allowed entry, into like an anarchist country.
Well, I could see I mean, there was a point in time to come to America, you had to have a sponsor family. Mm-hmm. And I think an open border with that as the requirement, like this family is vouched that they are going to plug you in, potentially house you for a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
Like that gets them like plugged right into the community and taken care of, where it's not the government's taking care of them. It's citizens that are taking care of them.
Yeah. And like, I don't know. Like I'm okay with having some kind of like loosely structured open border policy, you know, because I do kind of side with this particular side of the libertarians as far as like, why do we have a right to tell somebody they cannot traverse across the earth? You know,
there is, you know, and it's the first, I think Dave Smith kind of raised the private property rights. Like they don't have a right to come onto my property.
Sure. Yeah.
So like if they're coming across the border, they're entering somebody's property.
Yeah. But I mean, if somebody privately owns a bridge across the Rio Grande, you know, and that person's policy is if you can walk, you can come across the bridge. You know, or like if you can move, you can come across the bridge. It's
my land and I'm granting you access.
Yeah. And so then that road is going to connect to other roads. And yeah, in Ancapistan, in the magical land of Ancapistan, you're always going to be on private property. But I mean, the way that roads are going to operate in Afghanistan, in Ancapistan are you know, like not everybody's going to have to show their papers every time they turn onto a new street or anything like that. You know, there's going to be a good market solution for that. And so it's like people are going to come in and out of the country regardless. And so we're basically going to have an open border policy.
What would you think about, because my thought is almost kind of going back into that, you know, when people came in through New York, like they stopped, they got fingerprinted or they checked in. And they basically said, well, why are you here? What's your name? How many people in your party? Almost doing like just an initial background check screening, stamping your passport or whatever, your papers, and then waving you through.
Yeah.
Like, I think the problem now is just you have to apply like 3 years in advance to get all of because the rules and regulations for coming into the country is so burdensome and expensive. If you were to make it as easy as going from, you know, the United States to another country and you just get your paper stamped or you just get, you know, a quick record of who you are and then that's documented where you're going. I think to me, that's an open border with limitations that are understandable.
Like an open border with a filter.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not against that. I just, you know, I definitely don't like a completely locked down border, you know, because that can, and this is something that I actually heard from Spike Cohen, my best friend. But like, he was like, if we have like a totally shut border, like that's not just going to be used to keep people out. Like that can be used to keep people in, you know? And so I'm okay with leaning more towards the open border than the closed border, you know, just because I think people have a right to move on or go from one spot of the earth to another spot of the earth, you know?
Right. Well, and I think, again, having some type of a filter system where it's like a check-in process, like this is who I am, this is why I'm here, this is where I'm planning on living. This is, I mean, maybe saying like, yeah, I'm a skilled carpenter, so that's, you know, the career that I'm expecting to, you know, jump into once I arrive, or some type of a check-in process.
Well, okay, are we talking about now, or are we talking about Ancapistan?
Even Ancapistan.
See, like that's where I'm like, I don't like that. I don't like the idea of like
even checking in or screening.
Yeah, because I'm like, I'm putting myself in that shoe or in those shoes, and like, if somebody privately owns the border, you know, then how, like, if I want to cross, and if I you know, pay the toll to cross the bridge or whatever, like, you know, what happens when I get outside of that border, you know, like I said, for every privately owned road that you're on, are they going to have to be like, why are you here? Where are you going? Like, where did you come from? You know, because everything, if we have a private border in Ancapistan, everything would be ostensibly private property.
Well, in Capistan, there would be no government, right?
Right.
Okay, so in that scenario, if there is no government, then there's no country. There is no... I mean, if self-governance is literally the rule of the land,
so then
you don't have a country anymore.
So then Ancapistan is not a country, with no government. If there's no government, there's no border, and Ancapistan does not have a government. So then in this geographic region of the Earth, and let's just say it happens to be shaped exactly the same as the United States of America, lower 48, until you got from the border of one of the outside countries, until you got to your own private domicile, all right, whether you're coming in from Mexico or whether you're going to work or returning home from work, you're crossing private borders all the way home, And so, if we're talking about private property, but somebody who owns a border to Ancapistan, how do they determine who can cross that border? And it's almost something where I'm like, I think the only way you could have a private border even is if you had some sort of loose government, even if it's a really small government, but somebody would have to be talk to all the other private property owners along the border and be like, what are you guys okay with letting through the border? What are...
Have a voluntary agreement that this area would require a check-in before entrance.
Yeah. And so I think the only way you could have in anarcho-capitalist society, I think the only way you could have any kind of border is with a Hoppian style community, gated community, where you can have a physical brick wall around this community of homes, and you can enforce that border, but I don't think you could do that on a large scale.
Yeah, it's an interesting, even kind of looking at. Yeah, we're going way off topic, but this sure. This really fascinates me, and maybe we save this for another episode. Because the way that I look at pure anarcho-capitalism, because it's never been done before, but there's a lot of people that think it would work. It's about as legitimate as the pure socialism that everybody says has never actually been tried.
Yeah.
They both work in theory, but you have to take a lot of liberty on the human condition. I think both of them work if humans are born and are naturally good. Soon as you introduce evil into the scenario, I don't think either of them work.
Yeah.
So then again, I think that would be a great kind of that conversation to say, if that's our end goal, the more I've thought about it, the more I'm a voluntarist, pure and simple. I should be able to opt into a government and opt out of that government.
Yeah.
But I think there is a role for having a governing body. I think it's, the feudalistic, idea that America was founded on, where it was that local control should be all done in a local area. The problem is human beings always tend to bend towards authoritarianism.
Yeah.
And I think it stems from a desire to not be responsible for our actions.
Yeah.
And so if you can continue to push off that responsibility on someone else, that ends up being into a governing body. That governing body ends up growing and ends up becoming bigger, and more of the institutions. I mean, it always ends in a authoritarian, tyrannical system that implodes.
Yeah.
But even if you start, it just seems like human nature, you just see that happen, over the centuries, is every civilization starts like Rome, like we did as a republic.
Yeah.
And it just ends up collapsing under its own weight.
Yep.
And I just, in a perfect anarchy society, how do you prevent that from happening if you don't, I think our founders tried to chain down the government.
Yeah.
I think we've lasted way longer than anyone else's.
Well, the founding fathers definitely tried to create the anti-empire. They were trying,
and they were geniuses in how they did it.
But they were assuming that everybody in every role is going to have an anti-authoritarian bent,
looking out for their own best interest.
Yeah, or that I think they were assuming that all future generations were going to recognize where we came from and what we got away from, and that couldn't be further from the truth, and it
humans really love to forget history.
They love to forget history. They also love to impose their will onto others.
Yep.
Just like you were saying that there's an authoritarian bent, but the problem with this has been the greatest experiment in a anti-authoritarian country. The United States has been. It has been the biggest, longest experiment in a anti-authoritarian government. And look at where we are now. I just finished watching that Showtime special about Waco. It's the dramatized version. There's a documentary on it on Netflix, I think, but then the dramatized version, which I think is a lot better, is based off of two books. It's based on a book by David Thibodeau, and then by Gary Nassar. I think that's his. I think it's how you pronounce his name. I don't remember, but he was the FBI negotiator.
Oh, okay. So firsthand.
Yeah, and so you have two viewpoints, one from inside the compound and one from outside the compound, on opposing teams, and both of them were like, yeah, it's a pretty good retelling of the story, and so that to me tells me okay, I think this is probably going to be the most historically accurate, because I was 4 whenever Waco happened, so I don't remember, and so I was watching that, and I'm just, it just blows me away that we have a constitution that says that you have a right to privacy, and then Waco happens,
and no one was fired from it.
Nobody was fired.
Nobody was held accountable.
Nobody went to prison, and it's like,
oops.
RJ Evans of Who Touched the Thermostat podcast, which you guys should check out, he interviewed David Thibodeau. He was a Waco survivor, and it was a pretty good interview. I recommend you stay or you listen to the entire thing. He one thing that RJ said in the interview that just hit me like a fucking arrow in the heart. He goes, these people took pictures with the charred corpses of children,
How
and
sick.
How anybody can look at the Waco tragedy, regardless of what you feel about Branch Davidians or David Koresh or any of sort of the wackadoo religious aspect of it, regardless of how you feel about that. I don't understand how anybody can look at that scenario and come out the other side on that with anything other than hatred and contempt for the federal government, And this was a government that was founded on being anti-authoritarian, as libertarian a government as you could possibly get. That's how it started. And this is where we are with 200 years later, 250 years later, And so this is why I call myself an anarchist. I'm an anarchist. I like sort of the teeth that word has. Obviously I believe in voluntarism, but as far as dismantling the government so that we no longer have a government, I look at things like Ruby Ridge and Waco and how both of those things are related and culminated into something like the Oklahoma City bombing. I look at stuff like that and I'm like, this is all because you cannot have a government without it turning into an authoritarian regime in one way or another, you know, because like you said, people have a bend towards authoritarianism, and people who get involved with the government are no different. They want to impose their will on other people.
They're psychopaths.
They're psychopaths. They're fucking psychopaths, you know? And like, this experiment in government has, in my opinion, completely and utterly top to bottom proven that you cannot have a government and remain free at the same time.
And I totally agree with that, outside of the fact that without a government, how do you prevent a government from forming, knowing humans' propensity towards deflection of responsibility and authoritarianism, a desire to impose their will on others.
Yeah.
Like, I think in government's inevitable with those factors. So how do you put the chains? How do you keep? And again, the founders did everything they possibly could, and it has worked better than anything that's done before them. But like, human beings are just individually, I think we can be amazing. But you put them into groups, and they are disgusting.
Yeah.
And it'd be again, I think, a great potential podcast. And to kind of tie this back to where we started, we are at the point where we could wipe out the human condition because of tyrannical governments that are not operating based on the will of the people, but on their own benefits.
So I think you're right. I think that if a country as large as the United States were to all of a sudden not have any more government whatsoever, yes, there's going to be a power vacuum, and in the ashes of the old government, a new government is going to rise up. I absolutely believe in that. But I think a way that you can avoid that, and let's say everybody listening, take note. If the
put your comments in the
not the comments for this part, just say it out loud or whatever, but don't put it on the internet. But let's say the United States government collapses tomorrow, and we just don't have a government,
which is possible.
It is
at
possible.
The federal level.
Yeah. But like, if you live in a city, then those are going to be your breeding grounds for the next government. New York, LA, Seattle, Washington, DC, all the major metropolitan areas. That's where you're going to see a new government pop up, you know? And so then what's the answer to that? Well, how many Amish people do you see in New York City? 0. How many Amish people do you see in Cincinnati or Chicago, or there might be some in Cincinnati, I don't know. But how many Amish people do you see in these major metropolitan megacities? None. You know, they live out in the middle of nowhere. You know, they live, outside of town, and they take care of themselves, and they grow their own food, and they don't rely on electricity. They dig wells, so they have their own water. But
that's the culture. The culture drives independence in like those type of communities. And that's like,
what
you would need that culture everywhere. The again, that old school American pull yourself up by the bootstraps. It's all about, I have to take responsibility for my actions. I will be the only person to defend myself or better myself.
Yeah.
Like that.
Well, I don't think it has to be so singular, though. I think you can have, Jeremy Kaufman said this a couple years ago on Timcast, however long ago it was whenever he was on Timcast. But he said, you want to know the most successful anarchist group that's ever existed? They're like, who? He's like, the Amish. He's like a bunch of them got together and said, we're not doing this. We're not going to take part in this, and they didn't. And so it's like, yeah, that means you don't have access to the electrical grid, but like they're doing fine. They're doing fine.
And they do have government bodies that kind of, but it's voluntary. Like you can opt out at any point in time, and it's not like you're going to get.
And that does not mean that you have to be Amish,
right?
It doesn't mean you have to live without electricity, Like,
but the model works.
Yeah, I mean, you could have you could buy a couple hundred acres of land with a creek or a small river that runs through it, and you have access to running water. You can clean that water. You can have
hydroelectricity.
Hydroelectricity. You can put those wheels in there. I know there's a fucking word for it, but I can't think of what it is. But you can have.
You can grow your own food. You can raise your own livestock. You can be independent, truly independent.
Yeah, and here's the thing, and I think this is the real bugaboo that people have with thinking about living in an anarchist community or an anarchist society is they don't want to have to grow their own food, but for people like that, what you have to ask yourself, and whenever I come up against something where I'm like, ooh, this is something I struggle with the idea of anarchy and not having a pre-built system in place to take care of this thing, is I think, okay, well, is whatever this thing that I'm hung up on, is this worth $1 million dead Iraqis? Is this worth 9/11? Is this worth the war on drugs? Is this worth the war on poverty? Is this worth a war on guns? Is it worth all the hundreds and hundreds of thousands or millions of people who have died in wars the United States has been involved with? Is it worth it? And I think about, one thing that I get asked all the time whenever I'm talking about Ancapistan or anarchy is well, what if I find out that my neighbor is a child molester? Who's going to take care, or who's going to deal with him if I can't call the cops? And I'm like, okay, yeah, I get that. I am a father. I have children. If I found out my neighbor was a pedophile, I would really like to be able to call the cops and have this person removed from my community, but it's okay, well, can I take care of this without the police? Yes, I can teach my children how to defend themselves. I can teach them how to stay away from that person, how to recognize the signs of grooming and stuff like that. I can teach them all this stuff. I can prepare them for having to deal with something like that. And then if this dude ever did try to do anything to my kids, I can kill him. I can do that. I mean, me owning a gun is a way better deterrent for pedophiles than the police.
Cops showing up after the deed's been done.
Exactly.
I can prevent it myself.
Yeah, or if one of my kids gets kidnapped, I can hire a private investigator who will go out and find wherever my kid is, and I can go out there and kill whoever the fuck kidnapped my kid. And it's but people don't want to think about the work that they're going to have to do.
It's again not wanting to be responsible for,
but at the same time, it's the work that we would have to do now in order to provide for ourselves is nothing, absolutely nothing in comparison to what it was 80 years ago.
Oh yeah, we're just talking about the level automation and technology.
Everything that we know now versus a century ago, we know so much more about agriculture now than we did in 1923.
Those stupid Amish. What they could achieve with their culture and viewpoint.
But what we know now about agriculture, what we know now about medicine, what we know now about healthcare, that we have so much knowledge now that if the government just blinked out of existence tomorrow, we'd probably have it rough in the beginning, but we'll be fine.
Well, even
so much knowledge.
Just think about granted, I'm probably basing more of this on movies than on real life, but the Wild West. When you entered the town, there was a duly elected sheriff and a mayor. There was, if you walked into saloons, some saloons are no, you're going to have to check your weapon at the door. Mm-hmm. This is an agreed upon, if you want to drink here or live in this town, here are the rules that govern this town that we've all opted in for.
Yeah.
And it's a kind of sustaining community that have all agreed to certain rules, and if you're going to live there or visit there, they have to be, you know, published so you can follow them, or you keep on, you know, you keep moving on.
Well, everybody's idea of the Wild West comes from Hollywood. And so, like, nobody knows what it was actually like, you know? Like, the way that people talk in Western movies is not how they... Like, the accent, you know?
Well, what's that? What was that movie? It was a TV show, and they actually spoke in the appropriate vernacular. Oh, I'll think of it.
Rescue 911.
Yeah. No, it's such a good show, too.
It's just it's a random early 90s.
And I'm not talking about Rescue 911.
I used to watch that show all the time when I was a kid. But like, because of this sort of Hollywood image that we have of the Wild West, like, everybody thinks it was like this wild, extreme, like brutally violent time where you just ride your horse into town, shoot the sheriff in the dick, and then ride off to the next town. It was not like that. It was not like that at all. It was the safest, like, pound for pound. It was the safest time in American history.
When people died, it was because of, you know, lack of medicine.
Or self-defense or something like that, you know. But like, if a marauder rode into, like, okay, the Dalton Gang is a perfect example. The Condon Bank in Coffeyville, Kansas, where I'm from.
Coffeyville?
Coffeyville.
Coffee?
Nope, Coffey.
Oh, so it's probably the last name of coffee.
Yeah. There's only one coffee shop in that town, and it's ridiculously overpriced. So, but anyway, Coffeyville, Kansas. It's famous for the Dalton Gang, and also that's where Gary Busey went to community college. So, but yeah, in the turn of the century, it was like 1910 or 1912 or something like that. I don't remember the year, but the people of Coffeyville caught wind that the Dalton Gang, which was a gang of bank robbers, were headed into town.
Were they bank robbers or train robbers or
they
both?
Were bank robbers. Yeah. So they might have robbed trains too. They might have been both. But anyway, they caught wind that the Dalton Gang was heading to Coffeyville to rob the Condon Bank, which is their local bank. And the Condon Bank, like, company still exists to this day, actually.
For now.
Yeah.
As the banks continue to collapse around us.
So anyway, so the people of the city of Coffeyville took out their guns and they waited. And then the Dalton Gang showed up, and those motherfuckers killed the shit out of them, you know. And they had them propped up on display and everything. There's all kinds of pictures. Like, it's the one.
Sure, the reward was probably pretty decent too.
Well, it's like, I mean, it was a small community who was like, no, you're not going to do this.
You're not taking my shit.
You're not taking my shit. You're not taking my money. You're not bringing your bullshit into my town. I'm going to stop you dead in your tracks. No pun intended.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what they did. They killed the Dalton Gang. They came in and they had them propped up against these boards so that people could go up and take pictures with them, with their dead bodies. But that worked. That system worked, you know?
And today we want to take the guns away from law-abiding citizens.
We want to take the guns away from the people who
only the bad guys have the guns.
Yes, and like this is something that I cannot fathom.
Yeah.
Like, even back when I was a lefty, I remember hearing it's a cliche, but like it's a cliche because it is a solid watertight argument. If you ban guns, all right, criminals are the ones who will still have guns.
They don't follow rules. That's why they're criminals.
Will lose their guns, you know. And it's like it's so overused and oversaid. I mean, that it is a cliche, but there's a reason it's a cliche. It's because that's a rock solid argument. You cannot argue against it. You can't argue against it. You cannot argue against guns don't kill people. People kill people. And I know that everybody listening to this has heard this 15 billion times, and there's all kinds of other arguments, but goddamn, guns don't kill people, people kill people is a watertight argument that you cannot argue against it. And this is why I don't understand people who think that the level of gun control that they want is ever going to work. you know. And I was on, I know I said this in the last episode, but I'm going to say it again. Fuck it. But I was arguing with somebody on Twitter, and they were talking about taking away guns. No, guns are the problem, blah, and a bunch of bullshit like that. And I was like, okay, so you're talking about like a prohibition on guns. How has that worked on drugs? How the fuck do you expect
how
that to
work
work
on poverty?
Like, yeah.
How does every war turn out?
Guess what? Every narcotic out there is illegal on a federal level. And I can walk out of my front porch and I can buy black tar heroin if I want to. You know?
I still don't even know what black tar heroin is.
Well, you know how there's white tar heroin?
No.
I don't know. It's like there's a rainbow of colored tar heroin.
Yellow heroin?
There's hot pink tar heroin. There's aquamarine tar heroin.
Oh, I'd try that. I love that color.
There's rainbow tar heroin. They do that during June because it's Pride Month. No, but like I was like, I can walk out my front door right now and buy heroin. You know, but they don't have an argument against that either. They haven't thought about this stuff because their answer to that was, no, you can't. Fuck, I can't. What the fuck are you talking? You know where I live? Of course I can.
You don't have a clue what you're talking about.
I could buy from a kindergartner in this fucking town.
Yeah, that kid was giving me the stink eye, and he did have a raincoat on. Yeah. Thought he was a streaker.
Does that 5-year-old have a teardrop tattoo?
He knows what black tar heroin is.
But anyway, so I forgot the bigger point that I was going to make with this. I don't understand how people think this is going to work, and this is where I'm like, you can try that.
I think we talked about this earlier. It's not about whether it works or not. It's about opposing my morals and my viewpoint on others. Mm-hmm. It's about control, and that's it.
Ooh, actually, you know what? I think a different, or my brain's going a billion miles an hour. I think a different way to put that, and maybe it kind of hits on an emotional level. It's like they know you're not going to give up your guns, but now they can label you a terrorist. Now they can make you persona non grata, you know, because if you talk to Republicans now, if you told a Republican, like your average Sean Hannity Republican, like, I own a fully automatic rifle, they'd be like, that guy's a criminal, you know, because Republicans are pussies. And so, like, the Republicans will buy into it eventually. Mm-hmm. So, but I mean, that is why, like, it doesn't matter what law gets passed. And this is what I was saying at the March to Defend Our Lives rally. It doesn't, like, don't give a shit what laws are passed. You know, it doesn't matter what Gretchen Whitmer says. It doesn't matter what Joe Biden says or Kamala Harris or Donald Trump if he's elected. Doesn't matter. Do not comply whatsoever.
Yeah, there are rights the government has no jurisdiction over.
Fuck yeah. God damn, it's a good line. So anyway, yeah, the drone strike was bullshit.
Yeah, that's a drone strike. Fucking drones. World War III.
All right. Well, is there anything else you want to go over? Man,
yeah, I'm trying to wrapping this up, and then I think this is. I think every one of our episodes is fire, so fuck you if you don't believe that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was. I think we covered it all and some. Trying to think if we've got anything else coming up.
Well, let's talk about live streaming.
Yeah.
Okay. So moving forward, and this is probably going to start next week. We're going to start live streaming these episodes. We're looking at Monday at 5,
roughly. Yep.
Yeah, probably 5 or 6 o'clock. And we're going to live stream them on the State Sanctioned Media Locals page. So that way, if you want to toss us a few bucks a month, you can come and watch this live. And then after that, you know, the episode will be edited and aired on all the podcast apps. So if you wanna, you know, join in on the conversation, like if you wanna listen to these episodes as they're happening live, check out the State Sanctioned Media Locals page.
And we'll test this out, but what we're hoping to is after the podcast is kind of done, we'll stick around for 10, 15 minutes and be able to answer questions you might have in the chat.
Thing.
Yeah, kind of like a back and forth, kind of get to know us, ask questions that maybe, we can, jump into on a more intimate basis as opposed to
we need a name for that sort of like post-episode time. Like, I think the name We Love the State After Hours is good.
Statism after hours?
Or We Love the State at night,
When the state goes dark.
Yeah. What does Tim call it? He calls it is it just the after
show or something lame like that.
Yeah. Or the members only.
Yeah, that's something like that.
But yeah, this would be like, we're done talking all the political shit. We can just talk about whatever you guys want to talk about and do it for, 15 minutes, half an hour.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we're between the two of us, we're geniuses, and we kind of know just about everything, or at least we pretend to.
Yeah.
So we can answer just about any question you throw at us. We'll have an answer.
One of these people is going to be like, "Where's the clitoris?" They're going to be like,
"Fuck."
I'm going to be like, "Ben,
wrong podcast." So yeah, stay tuned for we'll probably post something on our socials about the link to our locals page. I was like, geez, that was literally a brain fart. Like, it stinks in here right now because that was so bad. So
dude,
locals,
that happens to me 30 times a day. Like, I'll have this long train of thought that it was one of the hardest things about doing stand up is because I'd have all my material like pre-written and pre-planned out and tested and everything. And sometimes I would just go up on stage and have the microphone and say the line, and then my mind just completely went blank. And it was just bullshit, dude.
That would be me all the time. So yeah, we'll send out, whether it'll be probably Instagram, it'll be on Twitter, and stuff like that for you to be able to click the link for our locals page. Again, like Andy said, like $5 a month. We're definitely, I mean, this won't be the only thing that will be available. I mean, we'll have obviously the immediate show, which will be live. We'll have kind of that Q&A after the show. And we've also got some more potential episodes kind of that have been unreleased that we could put behind the locals. So we definitely want to make it worth your while. But it definitely will give you much more personal access, I think.
For sure.
As opposed to kind of our bread and butter, what we've been doing.
Yeah. Yeah. If you paid like $10,000 a month for our locals, Ben and I could quit our jobs and,
there's nothing stopping you.
Yeah. Yeah, so what's stopping you from
minimum $5 a month, maximum your imagination.
Yeah. I mean, how much do you want me and Ben to quit our jobs?
And to service you full time. Wait. I think I just prostituted myself.
That's Ben's department. All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much. Go check out God Emperor everywhere you get your music.
Rock on!
Yeah. Peace.
Peace.